Back with another episode of AI Right and long awaited return of Megan. How are you, Megan?
Yeah, I'm good. I think I dipped out at the absolute last second last time around with a bit of a cold, as is very typical in this journey of toddler parenting. But yeah, I'm
Yes,
enjoying a brief spell of being completely fine with no viruses in the house.
You've said it now.
I know, it's like saying it's quiet in any department, but there we go.
Exactly.
and Andy, what's new with yourself?
I No, all good. Enjoying the sunshine. I think I also potentially had some sort of cold last week that sent me back a bit. And I've injured my knee, which I was on
No.
with. I was on a virtual physio call earlier, trying to work out how I maintain my training for like Tough X, which is end of June.
Virtual
So
physio, that's not something I thought I would ever hear of.
no,
Getting
they're
some
just doing a
stretches.
phone call and then they send you a PDF with some exercises. It's actually quite effective. Helped me before, but yeah. So I'm currently navigating the whole existential angst about my new gym identity being shattered by a bad knee. So that's where
Not ideal. Off on your holidays next week.
I
Getting
am
some
off to sunny
sun.
Tenerife. Although you're also going, Chris, to Tenerife, so everyone's going
I'm
to
going.
be spreading rumours we're going together. Just for the
I'm
record,
Oh,
going
we
to be
are
that's
not.
chasing.
cute. Have a nice
So,
joint holiday, guys.
Absolutely. I've put some time in his diary. The podcast for this. A
I
podcast
know.
live from Tenerife. It'll cost
Here,
anything.
if you're willing to fund me to join you, I'll come and do a co-podcast from Tenerife.
Oh, Andy, Barclays cover that? Well, I'll need to get that out the business expenses.
I just for the record, I am here as myself. I do not represent the views of my employer
Or pay Megan's holiday
or
expenses
pay
just for
Megan's
that.
Yeah,
holidays. What about-
that's a strong, clear, and documented no for the record.
Nice, nice. I'm not sure what our company policy is, but I'm pretty sure it's a strict no for the accountant. Um, anyway, we're here today to discuss Anthropic's Mythos. Andy, that you are quite particularly passionate about with some of the news recently about, obviously it's been given access to limited companies, but they couldn't release it publicly due to AI safety concerns. So, yeah, do you want to kick us off by like letting the listeners know, if people don't know already, what Mythos is?
Yeah. So Anthropic have been releasing some new models in the kind of frontier model space recently. So they released Opus 4.7. People get very excited about that. If you have Claude's account, you can use that. It's definitely a smarter model than the previous Sonnet 3.6 model and stuff. So it's and other Opus models. So that's been a good capability jump to see. In parallel, though, as you say, they made a series of announcements basically saying that they had trained a new model, trained a new sort of frontier model, but they were not going to release it. And they called it Mythos, it's a very interesting, exciting name, going with the whole kind of the family of names they've got for different epic works. So Mythos is a bigger epic work in ancient Greek, I think. But yeah, they basically said it's too dangerous to release to the public, which is an interesting idea. I've been listening and reading a lot about this. AI is probably the only space in the world where you say, my product that I want you to buy is really dangerous. Please be scared by it. So it's a very interesting sort of sales tactic, but it does seem to work. So everyone's very excited by this. The reason that they're saying it's too dangerous to release, and we can get into more of the details. I've got the system card actually up in front of me, the Anthropic release. So they release a system card for every model they release, which gives you a lot of details about how it's trained, its model characteristics, the data they used, etc., and tests they've done. The reason they're particularly concerned, they say, about Mythos is its ability to find vulnerabilities in software. So they say that they've tested it across a series of different projects and software, open source and otherwise, and it detected a really large number of, they call high sort of um, highly kind of vulnerable issues that they found. I can't remember the classification. So they basically said that there's a lot of vulnerabilities it's found, and this means that if they released it, cyber criminals would be able to use it to exploit those vulnerabilities. Um, they also, of course, say that defensive cyber capabilities could be boosted by using the model as well. So what they've done is they've actually released in a private preview to, I think it's 12 companies, most of them tech companies, American companies, all of them. So, Microsoft, AWS, Amazon, etc. But also JP Morgan Chase. That's the only financial institution that's there. They've not released it to any European or other companies, and they're calling this Project Glasswing. So where we are just now is they have this in this private preview. They've created a big fanfare, a lot of PR about it. And there's a lot of confusion. And there's a lot of kind of fear, obviously. There's a lot of excitement. So yeah, that's where we're at, basically. There's this super model they say they have that could destroy all of the software in the world, but they've got it in private preview for a few companies. So that's where we're at, which
So
is very
this is
interesting.
fascinating. This is fascinating to me as a marketing strategy because this isn't even the first time that a model has been held back for this reason. So I think way back around the GPT-2 stage of
GPT-2, yep.
OpenAI, they
Exactly.
held back an LLM release. Their concerns were slightly different though. It wasn't so much about software security or use of it in a coding framing. It was more about the worries they had about the creation of mis and disinformation, which
Yes.
is kind of hilarious because we have seen an increasing amount of mis and disinformation in the world as a result of the release of these models. So it's not that the risk was unfounded, but the pressures to release it, the financial incentives to release it have allowed them to carry on continuing to develop and continuing to release models regardless of that risk. I wonder what we'd need to see from the preview use to convince them to not just go ahead release it without any mitigation in place, or are they gonna learn and tweak and tailor it beforehand?
Yep. But to your point, this tactic has been used before, so exactly. So a lot of the executive team at Anthropic came from OpenAI. So I've just validated this. So Dario Amodei, who's obviously CEO of co-founder of Anthropic, he was VP of research at OpenAI during the early GP kind of 1, 2, 3 era, if you like. As were a suite of other people. Head of the research lab, their CISO, chief security officer, chief tech officer, etc. So, as you say, if you wear the skeptical hat, you obviously think they've played this trick before. And again, keeping in that vein, it's public knowledge that Anthropic are eyeing an IPO later this year. So they're going public as a company. So they are obviously going to do what they can to drive valuations as high as possible. Again, being a skeptic and being very cynical. So, as a PR campaign, it's worked. Everyone's talking about it. We're talking about it. We've said, we've got 20 minutes to talk in a kind of shorter episode. Let's slam in and talk about this. So it's definitely generating a huge buzz. I know for a fact in organizations across the world, it's getting people very kind of, switched on to what could be coming down the road in terms of, say, cyber offensives and just what it generally means for software. If you were to flip script, though, they could cry wolf a lot, but it only takes once for it to be true, for it to be very scary times indeed. And we can talk about maybe the ramifications of that, but but we'll come on to that. But the final point on the skeptic sort of hat I want to say is when you deep dive into their sort of system card and the report and stuff, they are a bit vague on some of the things they've tested. So the wording is a bit nebulous at times. They say things like, it detected many vulnerabilities, many of which were verified by a human, but they don't give sort of numbers. They give numbers on some of the things they've tested, but not others. So it's a bit unclear actually as to the benchmarking done. I think more and more will come out on this and it'll become a lot clearer. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Be interesting how the messaging evolves and if they do and when they do go public with the model, basically.
You had said though to me when we were planning to have this episode, that's kind of changed your perspective on the future of AI and the concerns that it could cause to things like major impacts like economic crises or cyber threats or infrastructure situations. Would it be right to have early stages of concern, or it's unproven? Do you think there could be other tactics, like you said, PR and marketing involved?
Yeah, I've been going through a bit of a kind of journey the past few weeks. I've been listening to a lot of stuff that normally I would roll my eyes at and say this is fear-mongering around AI safety, alignment research, existential risks from AI, etc. And I just sort of, the more I'm listening and reading, the more I've realized that, you can decouple a sort of pseudo-religious view of AI becoming super intelligent and it being conscious and sentient and all these things, right? You can separate that from the fact that these models are getting more capable to do things autonomously, and we're ceding more control to them. And that can be dangerous in certain circumstances. And I think having
Yeah.
decoupled that in my mind, I feel more comfortable thinking about the risks. So I've learned things like the main frontier labs, and again, a lot of listeners might know this, and you guys might know this, but frontier labs actually have reports that they compile around basically trying to determine what mitigations they would take in certain scenarios and also what they're looking for, signs they're looking for around dangerous behaviors or capabilities in models. So they map it to things like OWASP and NIST and other things. But basically they're looking at, is a model far more likely than it was for previous iterations in the family to pose a cybersecurity threat in the hands of bad actors? Is it more likely to help people who are trying to build bioweapons? Is it more likely people trying to build other types of weapons? Is it going to help people, financial crime? The misinformation one you mentioned, Megan. So they do have these sort of metrics they're tracking. And I think what I'm just seeing is obviously these things are getting more and more capable. We're more determined to build agentic systems that use them. So I think actually that, it's easier to create a lot of harm than I thought it was before. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. So even if Mythos isn't the model that can find all cyber vulnerabilities better than any model, say a model like that does come along, you just have to think what that means, because it's things like automatically the cycle times for cyber offense and defense have to shrink because you've got an AI running around this process that's running at machine speed, exploiting vulnerabilities. Just now we're sort of limited by human hacker computing bandwidth, sort of brain processing bandwidth, right? Okay, we can write scripts and programs and go and try and find exploits. But the dynamism of an AI model now, or a kind of agent, allows that to be far kind of more flexible. And it means, say it does discover 100 vulnerabilities, defensively on the cyber side, you're going to have to try and close 100 vulnerabilities really quickly. And some organizations are not built for that yet. So if you think about that, and you start exploiting, like, say, the open source ecosystem where anyone has access to the codes, it doesn't take much ingenuity with these models potentially to start planting very subtle vulnerabilities that have big downstream impacts, because you start taking down infrastructure or financial markets or whatever. So it's interesting. I think it's an exciting but nerve-wracking time we're getting towards, I
think it gives me two major questions. One is, to what extent is this risk controllable, because the party that owns and operates the model and its access can choose and selectively roll it out to trusted users. That's what Glasswing is, the kind of first step in trying to see if they can control the user group in such a way that it can be used more sensibly. And then separately, to what extent is this specific model so much of a step change that it will be materially different from the releases that we've seen of previous models, which have always been able to go and do a certain degree of looking through codes for vulnerabilities and identifying routes to attack for bad actors. So the sort of two kind of questions there. Is this model actually a complete step change in the threat? And are there meaningful ways in which the threat can be controlled by the owners of the model and the providers of the model?
Yeah, no, they're great questions. So on question one, just my thoughts are, one, is it best a stopgap? Because open source keeps catching up with the frontier models.
Yep.
The reason it's catching up, I think, is because what we're discovering is that the secret sauce that the frontier labs gives them a bit of an edge. But basically, it's all down to the scaling hypothesis. So the scaling hypothesis just says make the models bigger and give it more data and it gets better. I think the fact that open source keeps catching up shows that that's basically holding, because it's not something special that Anthropic or OpenAI or XAI are doing that determines this kind of step-changing capability. Sometimes it is, to be fair, right? When I was listening to a podcast with Dario Amode the other day, and he was saying that, it's almost like cookery. They're sort of playing with all these post-training recipes and stuff, and they've got a kind of intuition for it. and that does give them a bit of an edge sometimes. They have a new model release, they've just got some things right. So there is a bit of kind of artistry, if you like, there, less than science. But I think fundamentally these open source models keep catching up. So what will happen is more training runs, more data, new techniques, but the new techniques are often not super difficult to actually build and
I love
deploy.
thinking about it as a recipe. I think of it
Yeah.
as a recipe with 3 different core ingredients. Model architecture, which we are seeing some very clever ways to
Yeah.
really ramp up the performance of what have
Yep.
been around as the kind of core fundamental technologies for a little while. That's recipe item 1. You've got compute and access to compute, and you've got data and access to data. And I think you're right that no one of those is held by any particular organization with the ability to gatekeep others' access.
Yeah.
Not really.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Anthropic will say that, our specific way of doing reinforcement learning, human feedback, AI feedback on learning, the different parameter efficient fine tuning methods, all of that stuff, their mix of that is kind of their secret sauce. But again, it's not enough of a differentiator. So that piece worries me. I think number 1 doesn't give us much protection. It gives us a bit of time potentially. I think on number 2, is it a step change in capability? It's a good point you say about, existing models could run over your code. What Anthropic are claiming for Mythos is that it has things like infinite context window, effectively. So it's I need to look into more details about it, right? But it's basically saying the context window is so big that it can ingest the entire code base and reason over it very effectively. Previous models were struggling to do that. So if anyone's kind of hacked around with Claude Code, as soon as your code base gets pretty big, you have to kind of guide it along to look at bits in isolation. And this is where the whole thing comes. Yeah, this is how the whole thing comes around. People are saying we're getting all these issues in production because basically Claude Code's trying to fix one thing and it's going away and changing lots of stuff over there. It's not reasoning over the whole code base in its entirety. They're saying they've solved this problem with Mythos. So that's the first thing that gives me a bit concerned. The other thing is they're saying that they've introduced more capabilities around how it kind of self-corrects itself recursively. So it's just they've extended this idea of thinking and reasoning and chain of thought to be more kind of, it's self-critiquing a bit more. So they're saying that basically it's reasoning over a far larger piece of data, but the quality of the sort of the thinking that it's doing back and forward with itself is of a higher degree as well. So I think all of that, to be fair, points to me. It's not to say it's magic, right? Again, this is the whole point of the previous piece of the conversation. They've not came up with like a new neural net architecture or quantum computing or something. It's nothing like that. But what they've said is like the next obvious things to try seem to have panned out, and with more compute and more data, the model can do all these crazy things. So I'm kind of, I take with a pinch of salt that it is such a humongous step change that no one else will that it will just destroy everything. I don't think that's what's happening. But I can totally buy that with these minor improvements and these slight changes in capability, the step change in the potential damage could be a lot higher. And then questions how you mitigate are very hard to answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I think overall it's clear that there is an elevation of risk. The model, having improved in its reasoning ability, elevates the amount of risk, clearly. To what extent, we won't really know until people start to dig in and try it out. Are we in a position where all organisations, no matter how in other spaces they're not adopting AI, they have to, for security reasons, get ahead of this? So basically all companies have to start investing in AI.
That's a really great question. I don't actually know if that helps you here. It's a good question. I don't know though, right? But it's a good question. So my kind of view is for this one in particular. So say Mythos is as it is described. They release it or someone gets access to it who's a malicious actor. And they're able to very quickly go into most of the open source packages that are used and introduce kind of really subtle vulnerabilities that can basically, you're pulling in your normal vulnerability detectors or something, don't get it. They don't catch it, just as an example. The mitigation there could be, we have equally powerful AI that we hook into all the vulnerability detection mechanisms. The other approach is actually something like, we pull up the drawbridge and we don't use anything open source anymore. And actually, I
God.
posted on LinkedIn about I posted on LinkedIn about this recently, right? I posted on LinkedIn. I can totally imagine a world. I'm not saying this is the right approach. Anyone listening who has the power to enforce this, but I can imagine a world where, even temporarily, you almost get to the point where everything's so dangerous out there that you mandate everything has to be rebuilt using AI yourself in-house. And it's like you get no net productivity again from AI because AI is out there making everything dangerous. So you build everything yourself, but you're having to waste all these tokens reinventing the wheel. So it's like there's a really I don't envy the position of chief security officers just now at all. Like I don't really know the answer here. It's got to be multifaceted, but I don't know. Yeah.
I think on the use of packages as a sort of abstraction tool, one of the key ways that we need to be managing this is if you're at runtime pulling in the latest package, whatever the latest package is, you're immediately opening yourself up to whatever the latest vulnerability that's been introduced is. If you pin to versions and or create some kind of interstitial package management process, you can not just throw in the latest that's been kind of pushed in those packages. I feel like there are quite clear ways in which a technology organisation that is otherwise not adopting AI at any great pace but wants to keep itself safe can just not move with the pace of the wider development cycle and stay to a degree safe.
So a lot of enterprises adopt that, right? But an interesting challenge to that would be this is also finding existing vulnerabilities that have not been detected. So the challenge also becomes, you pin to version 4 of something because you're worried version 5 and above will be compromised. But what this model could potentially do is go and find out how version 4, 3, 2, and 1 was vulnerable all the time and no one knew, and now people can exploit it. So what do you do if the entire version chain, or you can't actually go back enough because it's not compatible with everything else? So I could totally envision that world as well. So you've got scikit-learn version 3.8 blah 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 or whatever the version is, and you're like, I actually can't roll back many versions, and all of those have been exposed to that. That's the world we're potentially entering, because what they're saying is it has, and again the tests aren't, I call it reading the system card very sort of high level. It's not an absolute slam dunk that this is what's happening, but what they're sort of claiming in the PR is this is going and finding stuff that people didn't find before. So it's even worse than what I was initially saying.
So there's a distinction between package vulnerability detection and injection, and to guard against to guard against one but not the other, you're into.
And I think both are a worry. Yeah, exactly. I think both are a worry. And then the question's going to be, does anyone remember Log4j? That big issue a few years ago. Remember? Did you have to deal with this?
Oh yeah, was that 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
Something like that, yeah. And etched in my memory, right? Think about the response in whatever organisation you were in, dear listeners, when Log4j happened, right? And everyone's like, there's this vulnerability in an upstream Java package. It's funneling through. It's everything to do with Spark, everything that uses the JVM, etc. And I remember the fixes. The fixes were like, go onto your server and run this script command and stuff. It was mental, right? Because it's just this. But this is how organizations. Some of them are a bit patchy on this stuff. There's no kind of push button, go clean everything in large old scale organizations necessarily. No. So if you're talking about the timescales being sped up, the cycle time for detection of a vulnerability or injection of a vulnerability, to your point, you have to close it very fast. So that's probably to your point earlier. That's where AI as a defensive posture comes in, because that can help you increase your cycle times. But we have to build systems where it can leverage that, because the AI might be able to go, you have to take these 15 actions in order to make yourself safe. But if those 15 actions are, I need to go to 10 governance forums, and I need to run 100 scripts, and I need to go into every server and deploy a kind of new security agent or something, you're leaving yourself vulnerable for all. So it's just everything sped up. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to wrap up pretty shortly, but all of this does not excite me about the future of what AI is going to do for my life as an individual. All of this is like almost a zero-sum game of there'll be more potential for attacks, and more is going to be needing to be done to prevent those attacks. And there's almost no room left in that for us to actually get joy from AI development. So I'm just sat here like, oh great, okay. Why bother?
Well, just to end things on a wee bit more of a positive note, and Andy, you might need to
Is there
shoot
one?
off, but where are you getting a lot of positivity gains at the moment from AI as it becomes more powerful recently? Where are you finding that?
No, there's none.
No, nothing for you.
The end. It's the end.
Andy's got empty pockets.
Yeah.
I'm going. Well, they say. Well, actually, it would be good if we did a follow-up episode on Megan. I would love your take on this. Do you know the essay by Daru Amode, "Machines of Love and Grace"? Have you heard about this?
No.
So I think it was last year or something. Oh, we'll do a whole deep dive on it. But last year or something, he released a 60-page essay on his positive view of an AI future. Some of it is bonkers, but we should definitely speak about it because I think we'd all have strong opinions on it. But to your note about a positive things, many people have a positive vision of the AI future. I think just now it's I'm getting excited by what AI can do, but I am also kind of having a lot of existential angst again about what does all this mean. So
Yeah, I think the reason I asked that question is because the majority of what I'm doing, my teams are doing, what we're doing within the BBC as an organisation is more on the creative, joyful experience creation side, and that's where we're investing most. And I hope that does have an impact on each of us materially as human beings, rather than just machines fighting machines and using
machines
more
fighting
energy
machines
to do so.
Machines fight. At least if the machines are fighting the machines, they don't have time to think about taking us over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
The
that's
Doomsday
my
episode.
that's my silver lining.
Alright guys, well, that was really good, short and sweet.
Right.
But no, good to see you both, and
Thank you.
catch up soon.
Yep.